Conservatives all over the world and the far right are uniting to take away your human rights, and you don't even realise it. An Israeli state hell-bent on exterminating Palestinians isn't just disaster for those in Gaza, it's a disaster for you too. Israel's real mission isn't to defeat Hamas, it's to destroy and bury the very premise of international law and human rights. Just look at their treatment of UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Agency for Palestinians. They literally bombed their aid trucks. What does this have to do with international law? Well, collective punishment is obviously a war crime. It comes weeks after what the International Court of Justice told us, that if what happens in Gaza continues, there's a real risk of genocide. Ignoring these warnings and continuing to engage in collective punishment and starvation of the Palestinian people should be a stark warning to all of us. Israel is succeeding in its mission to avoid accountability. The far right have exactly the same mission as Israel, not to exterminate Palestinians, but to bury international law and human rights. Because once they do that, they have an endless supply of people they can not only scapegoat, but use to develop their gains illegally or legally. No one's there to stop them. Don't believe me? Just listen to what Nigel Farage has to say about the European Court of Human Rights.
We struggle to deport people. You know, Article 8, the right to a family life, all these things get quoted. British judges draw on it. I mean, Ivan, let's get to the crux of this. We are not deporting people, even those who failed asylum. And we come up against the ECHR time and time again, and that is unacceptable.
It's simply not true, Nigel.
No, this doesn't just matter because I'm brown or because Palestinians are dying. It matters because they're going to come for you next. Just look at what's happened in this country already. An unelected Prime Minister and an unelected Home Secretary passed legislation that made it illegal for you to make too much noise on a protest and for police to be able to shut down whatever protest they want to. The next step, of course, is Rwanda, where we can choose to deport anyone we wish, regardless of what they've done, to a different country. And the only reason that's being stopped, as Nigel Farage points out, is because of international rights that we have won after World War II. It's not just about the European Court though, it's about human rights as a concept. Just listen to what prominent ally of Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, has to say about the right to sick pay.
It is very hard to believe that the right to paid holiday is an absolute moral right.
If you thought Brexit was bad as a constitutional crisis, just wait until Israel finishes the job on international law and human rights have no basis in reality. Then individuals like Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage will come out to campaign for the removal of your human rights. The very human rights that were won after World War II. And that's not because after World War II we decided to be better to people. It's because after World War II we realised that humanity is capable of committing heinous crimes against each other if there aren't adequate checks and balances. Hence the creation of human rights. Universal human rights, which means that either we're all human or none of us are. We all have those rights, regardless of where we come from or what colour our skin is. So it works the other way around too. Once one group of people have their human rights removed, all of us do. So what do we do about it? You're probably thinking I'm just a normal guy or girl in my living room watching this interesting video about human rights. What does it have to do with me? Well, just like Brexit, we can't go out and fight for an institution that has failed to protect people. So we need to go out there and fix it and campaign for it to be fixed. And that starts with campaigning for a ceasefire. Millions of people across the world, and many in the UK, have been campaigning on this issue for months now. And the momentum has grown and grown and grown. And therefore the consent for international universal human rights is being fought for and demonstrated for. That's vital, because the next step is making sure that those international institutions are capable of holding these states to account. So this might come in the form of a Palestinian state. It might come in the form of a one-state solution where Israelis and Palestinians live together peacefully and democratically. Whatever happens is the decision of Palestinians. But what our job is to make sure that our human rights are not being violated through the extermination of individuals elsewhere. That's why it's so vital to keep campaigning for a ceasefire and to make sure that we don't ignore what's going on in Palestine, because what happens there will affect us. As for Netanyahu, Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak and all the other world leaders and individuals complicit in what's happening in Palestine, well, it'll be a true test of international law to see whether or not they face justice. And that's why the far right are obsessed with Israel, because they know what happens in Palestine determines what happens to the rest of the world, not just the Middle East, but all of us. We have to make sure to be there to fight for our rights.